The first time Olivia saw the house, it looked more abandoned than lived in. She had been driving through a quiet back road in northern Maine, the kind of place where the trees grow so thick they feel like a wall pressing in on both sides. Her phone had lost service miles back, and the GPS had given up before that. It was late in the afternoon, with a pale sun fighting through heavy gray clouds, and she had pulled over to stretch her legs. The house sat at the end of a narrow gravel path, half hidden by overgrown weeds. Its wooden siding had faded to a sickly gray, the windows either dark or shuttered, and the roof sagged slightly in the middle like a tired old man. Yet, despite its condition, something about it seemed watchful, as if it knew she had stopped to look at it. She told herself it was just curiosity that made her walk closer. Maybe it had once been a boarding house or a family's summer retreat left to rot in the woods. She noted how silent everything was. No birds, no breeze, not even the hum of distant traffic. The quiet pressed into her ears until she could hear the faint crunch of her own shoes on the gravel. A shiver ran up her spine, though the air wasn't particularly cold. When she reached the front gate, a rusted iron arch nearly swallowed by vines, she stopped. The gate was open, hanging loosely on its hinges, and beyond it the path wound up to a porch that sagged under the weight of moss. She hadn't meant to come this far, but there she was, staring up at the house as if waiting for it to notice her that a sound came from inside. It was faint, muffled, but unmistakable, a soft creak like footsteps on an old staircase. Olivia froze. It was impossible, she thought. No one could be living here. But the sound came again, a groan of wood under shifting weight. She peered through the shadowy windows but saw nothing except the warped reflection of herself standing in the fading light. A logical voice in her head whispered, an animal, maybe, a raccoon or a fox. Yet her chest tightened, and she felt the prickle of being watched from behind the glass. She pulled her jacket tighter and glanced back at her car, half hidden by the curve of the road. Going back suddenly seemed very wise, but the strangest thing happened when she turned to leave. From the corner of her eye, she saw the front door move. Just slightly, enough that she knew it hadn't been the wind. The door had opened an inch, the darkness inside yawning wider. Her pulse skipped, and her throat went dry. She didn't move, didn't breathe, until the door eased back into place as though nothing had disturbed it at all. Olivia stood there, gripping the straps of her bag, trying to decide if she had imagined the entire thing. But when she glanced down at the gate again, her heart stuttered. The iron gate, which had been sagging open when she arrived, was now shut. She backed away slowly, refusing to turn her back on the house. Step by step, she made her way to her car, fumbling for her keys with trembling fingers. Her eyes never left the porch, the dark windows, the silent door. By the time she got behind the wheel and locked it, her breathing had quickened into short, sharp gasps. The house sat in the dimming light, unchanged, silent, as if mocking her fear. She told herself again and again that she had only imagined the movement, the sound, the gate. But when she finally drove off, gravel spitting from her tires, she couldn't shake the image of the house watching her retreat. And even stranger, she swore she saw the faint flicker of a light come on in an upstairs window as she rounded the bend and lost sight of it. Emily hesitated on the gravel path leading to the porch, Duke's leash slack in her trembling hand. The night air felt heavier here, as though the space around the Ashwood house existed slightly out of sync with the rest of the world. Every step closer amplified the faint creak of old wood and the distant ticking of some unseen clock. She told herself she'd only look through a window, nothing reckless. But curiosity is a quiet predator, and it had already sunk its teeth into her. She approached the porch stairs and tested the bottom step with her boot. It moaned under her weight, the sound echoing far louder than it should have. Duke pressed against her leg, ears flattened, eyes locked on the dark doorway. Emily reached the front door and placed her hand against the weathered wood. It was ice cold, far colder than the September air. A sudden gust of wind pushed through the trees, and for a moment she thought she heard whispering, soft, indistinct voices riding on the breeze, weaving in and out of the rustling leaves. The door, inexplicably, was ajar. Just an inch, but enough. Emily's heart lurched. If teenagers had broken in, she might catch them before they did more damage. If a squatter was inside, maybe she could call the police. But some deeper instinct warned her this wasn't ordinary trespassing. She nudged the door with her fingertips, and it swung open silently, as if someone had been waiting on the other side. The faint smell of dust and damp would waft it out, mingled with something faintly metallic, blood or rust. She couldn't tell the hallway beyond was cloaked in shadow, but her eyes adjusted quickly. An old staircase rose on the left, its railing draped in cobwebs. Faded wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing splintered wood beneath. A cracked mirror leaned against the wall at an awkward angle, and for a moment Emily thought she saw movement in its surface, a flicker of something darting past behind her. She turned quickly. Nothing. Duke's growl was low, a rumble that vibrated against her leg. The air inside felt stagnant, like a room sealed for decades, yet it carried the faint echo of footsteps retreating upstairs. Something compelled her to step farther in. She wasn't sure whether it was adrenaline or stubbornness, but her fear was tinged with a strange exhilaration. She'd always been fascinated by ghost stories, but standing here now, she felt the thin membrane between story and reality stretch to its breaking point. The front door swung shut behind her with a dull click, making her jump. Duke barked once, sharp and nervous. Above them, on the landing at the top of the stairs, a faint light pulsed. 1, 2, 3 times, then went dark again. Emily's voice cracked as she whispered, "Is someone there?" But the house only answered with silence. Emily froze beneath the staircase landing, her breath catching as the afterimage of the pulsing light lingered in her vision. The house seemed to settle, old wood creaking faintly as if acknowledging her presence. Duke stayed rigid, a low growl vibrating in his chest. The stillness wasn't empty. It was charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. Emily whispered to herself that she'd just check the ground floor, then leave. But as she scanned the hallway, her eye caught something on the floor, a small, child-sized shoe, half buried in dust, its laces frayed and stiff with age. She crouched and reached for it, but Duke whined and tugged backward, his claws scraping against the warped wooden floor. The shoe was cold, far colder than the surrounding air. She turned it over in her hands and saw, faintly etched into the sole, the name Kara. A memory of Lena's hushed words, "2 families live there. They don't talk about it," flashed through her mind. Emily set the shoe back exactly where she found it, a small gesture of respect she couldn't quite explain. Somewhere deeper in the house, a door clicked shut on its own. She moved cautiously toward a side room off the hallway, a living room, maybe, though time had stripped it of comfort. A faded floral sofa slumped under years of dust, and yellowed newspaper clippings littered the floor like fallen leaves. Emily picked one up and brushed it clean enough to read. Local family disappears without a trace. Search ends after 2 weeks. The article was dated 15 years ago. Her throat tightened as she scanned the room, realizing there were at least a dozen similar clippings scattered about, all covering the same story, but with increasingly grim headlines. The faintest sound reached her ears, a soft humming, like a lullaby sung through water. Emily's blood ran cold. It wasn't coming from upstairs now, but from a narrow hallway at the back of the living room. The tune was almost tender, but off-key, the way a recording might sound if warped over time. Duke's hackles rose again, and he began backing up, his leash straining against her hand. She wanted to follow the sound but felt an instinctive dread that stepping into that hallway might be crossing some invisible threshold she wasn't ready for. Before she could decide, a sudden crash echoed from upstairs, a heavy object tipping over or a door slamming hard. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The humming stopped instantly, as if startled. Emily's heart pounded against her ribs. Every rational part of her screamed to leave, but the part of her that had brought her here in the first place, the part hungry for the truth, whispered that if she walked out now, she'd never forgive herself. She tightened her grip on Duke's leash and whispered, "Come on, boy," before placing her foot on the first step of the staircase, heading toward the second floor. Each step Emily took up the staircase groaned under her weight, the sound echoing far too loudly in the hushed house. Dust stirred into the air, catching thin beams of moonlight that leaked through the cracks of boarded-up windows. Duke stayed pressed close to her leg, every muscle taut, his nails clicking softly against the wood. Halfway up, she paused. The silence was so complete it pressed against her ears, except for her own heartbeat, a heavy drum in the dark. She had the strangest sense that the house itself was listening at the top of the stairs. The landing stretched into a narrow hallway. The faded wallpaper, patterned with climbing roses, curled away from the walls like dead skin. Four doors branched off, one directly ahead, two on the left, and one on the right. The air up here was different, colder, heavier, tinged with the sharp scent of mildew. Emily tightened her grip on the flashlight she'd stuffed in her jacket pocket. Its weak beam cut through the dark, revealing scattered debris, a child's wooden block, and an overturned picture frame with shattered glass. She crouched to pick up the frame. The photograph inside showed a smiling family, a man in flannel, a woman with kind eyes, and two children, a boy about 10, a girl who couldn't have been older than 6. Their faces were frozen mid-laughter, yet the photo had warped, water-stained edges that blurred the details. As Emily traced the image of the little girl, Duke suddenly snarled, his fur bristling. He stared down the hall at the door on the far left. Emily followed his gaze, and her stomach dropped. The doorknob was slowly turning, back and forth, though no one stood on the other side. The sound of the turning knob grew louder, grinding against the silence. Emily's flashlight flickered as if reacting to the movement. She whispered a shaky hello, but her voice felt swallowed before it reached the door. Then, as abruptly as it began, the knob stilled. The hallway fell back into silence. She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding and edged toward the nearest room instead, trying to regain her nerve. She pushed the door open. Inside was what had once been a child's bedroom. Faded wallpaper with cartoon animals, a small wooden bed, and toys scattered across the dusty floor. But it wasn't the toys that froze her blood. On the wall above the bed, drawn in something dark that had dried into a cracked, reddish-brown, were uneven letters. Kara was here. The words stretched jaggedly across the wall, smeared as if written by a trembling hand. Emily's flashlight beam quivered in her grasp. Duke whimpered and nudged her leg, urging her back toward the hall. Behind her, in the quiet, came the unmistakable sound of a child's giggle, soft, fleeting, and close enough to brush her ear. Emily spun toward the hallway, her pulse hammering. The giggle still echoed in her ears, thin and fragile, as though it might shatter under its own weight. Duke pressed against her leg, his body rigid, his ears twitching toward every faint creak. Emily forced herself to breathe evenly, reminding herself she was hearing things, a trick of acoustics in an old house. But when she glanced back at the words on the wall, Kara was here. A shiver crawled up her spine. Something about the handwriting felt desperate, more a warning than a declaration. She stepped back into the hallway, her flashlight beam sweeping over the doors. The one with the restless doorknob, far left, was now perfectly still, but the silence felt unnatural, staged. The door at the far right, however, was ajar just enough for darkness to spill out like ink. Emily swallowed hard. "Just another room," she whispered to Duke, as if saying it aloud could make it true. She reached for the doorknob and pushed gently. The hinges squealed, and the door swung open to reveal what had once been a small study. A desk covered in dust, a toppled chair, and a shelf lined with moldering books. On the desk lay a stack of old photographs. Emily picked one up with shaking fingers. The image was faded, but she could make out the little girl from the earlier photo, Kara, standing in front of the Ashwood house. She wasn't smiling this time. Her expression was solemn, her eyes fixed on something behind the photographer. The next photo showed the same house, but empty windows stared like hollow sockets. Another depicted the same front porch, except now, faintly, a blurred figure loomed in the upstairs window. Emily's throat tightened. She set the pictures back down carefully, dust puffing into the air like breath. A sudden slam made her jump. The door she'd just opened had shut behind her with violent force. Duke barked sharply, his claws scrabbling on the wooden floor. Emily rushed to the door and twisted the knob, but it wouldn't budge. It was as though something on the other side was holding it closed. She banged against it with her fist, her voice trembling. "Hey, stop, let me out." The air in the room thickened, a faint pressure building around her ears. For a heartbeat, she thought she heard a child's whisper, 2 syllables, soft and urgent, "Don't stay." Then, as quickly as it had locked, the door creaked open on its own, swinging lazily into the hall. Emily stumbled back, her breath ragged. Duke darted forward, sniffing the air as if chasing an invisible presence. The hallway was empty, but a faint draft now carried the smell of something burning, old wood and faint ash. Emily tightened her grip on Duke's leash and glanced toward the staircase. Somewhere below, a new sound emerged, the slow, deliberate creak of footsteps crossing the living room floor, even though no one should have been downstairs. Emily held her breath, straining to listen. The creaking footsteps downstairs were steady, deliberate, as though someone was walking from one end of the living room to the other, pausing, then pacing back again. Duke's ears pivoted toward the sound, his body tense, tail rigid. Emily whispered, "Stay close," though her own voice trembled. The sensible part of her screamed to leave, but curiosity, sharper now, drove her forward. The burning smell, old wood and faint ash, lingered in her nose as she crept toward the staircase. The stairs groaned beneath her boots, each step sounding like a warning. Duke descended first, his claws clicking softly, head low, nostrils flaring. When they reached the bottom, the living room appeared unchanged. The faded sofa slouched under dust, the clippings scattered on the floor. But the air felt disturbed, as though someone had just been there. Emily swept her flashlight beam across the room. Nothing. Then, from the kitchen doorway beyond, came a faint metallic clang, like a pot being shifted on a counter. Emily stepped toward the kitchen, heart thudding. The doorway was framed in cracked paint, and the darkness beyond it seemed almost tangible. She flicked the light switch out of habit. Nothing, just the dead click of a switch with no power behind it. Her flashlight revealed a kitchen frozen in time. Rusted appliances, a toppled chair, a broken clock on the wall forever stuck at 3:17. On the counter lay a plate covered in dust, as if someone had set it down mid-meal years ago. A single child's drawing, yellowed with age, was pinned to the refrigerator with a cracked magnet. A crude crayon sketch of the Ashwood house with a stick-figure family standing outside. In the upstairs window of the drawing, a dark scribbled shape loomed. Suddenly, the footsteps resumed. This time, impossibly, they came from the front porch behind her. The sound of slow, deliberate treads on the porch boards sent a chill through her. Duke spun around, growling. Emily's flashlight swung toward the front door. The doorknob rattled once, twice, then fell still. Her throat went dry. Whoever, or whatever, was outside had no interest in coming in. It wanted her to know it was there. She inched backward until her legs brushed the kitchen counter. Feeling more trapped than she'd ever felt in her life, then came a different sound, a faint, distorted voice, so low she almost mistook it for wind. It drifted through the cracks of the front door, a single, chilling sentence. "You shouldn't be here." Emily's skin prickled as if every nerve recognized the truth in those words. Duke barked, the sound sharp and desperate. The front porch boards creaked again, but when Emily dared to peek through a narrow slit in the curtains, the porch was empty, just the moonlight on peeling paint and the endless dark beyond. A sudden crash from upstairs snapped her attention upward. Someone, or something, was back on the second floor. Emily's pulse quickened as she turned back toward the stairs. The upstairs crash still echoed in her ears, as if the walls themselves were repeating the sound. Duke stood at the bottom step, ears rigid, nose twitching at something unseen. The smell of ash had grown sharper, mingling with the damp odor of rot. She hesitated at the foot of the staircase, the flashlight's beam quivering in her hand. Every instinct urged her to flee, but a deeper pull, a need for answers, anchored her to the spot. The climb felt longer this time. The staircase groaned with every shift of her weight, a slow rhythm of creaks that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Halfway up, a draft whispered past her ear, carrying a faint murmur, words she couldn't quite decipher. When she reached the landing, the hallway seemed subtly different, longer somehow, the walls darker. The door to the child's bedroom was wide open now, its faded animal wallpaper more grotesque in the flickering beam of her light. The phrase "Kara was here" appeared fresher, as if it had just been scrawled moments before. The soft tap-tap-tap echoed from the end of the hall, drawing her attention to the door that had been turning on its own earlier. The knob now rested still, but the tapping persisted, steady, deliberate, like knuckles rapping wood in a coded message. Emily swallowed, her throat dry. She edged closer, Duke pressing tight against her leg. She placed her palm on the knob. It felt warm, unnaturally so, as though someone had just released it. With a deep breath, she twisted and pushed the door open. The room inside was nearly bare, except for a single overturned dresser and a cracked oval mirror leaning against the far wall. Dust coated every surface. Yet there were fresh footprints on the floor, small, barefoot impressions leading to the mirror. Emily's breath caught. She raised her flashlight toward the glass and saw her own reflection staring back, pale and wide-eyed. But over her shoulder, faint and shimmering, was the figure of a small girl. Kara's translucent face peered out, her mouth moving silently, forming words Emily couldn't hear. The temperature plunged. Duke snarled, the sound deep and guttural. Behind her, the hallway lights, non-existent only moments ago, flared weakly to life, flickering like dying candles. Kara's image lifted a small hand and pointed, not to the mirror, but toward the attic hatch above the hallway ceiling. The moment Emily glanced upward, the mirror shattered with a deafening crack, glass spraying across the dusty floor. Kara's glow vanished. The hallway fell silent again, but Emily knew what the gesture meant. The answers she sought were waiting above. She tightened her grip on Duke's leash, staring up at the attic hatch. Emily gripped the splintered banister, her knuckles white, as she and Duke crept toward the narrow door she hadn't noticed before, half hidden behind a rotting wardrobe on the second-floor landing. The attic access. The smell of ash was stronger here, thick and acrid, prickling her throat. A draft whispered through the cracks, and the faint sound of soft sobbing drifted down from above. Every instinct screamed to leave, but another part, stubborn, desperate, needed to understand what had happened in this place. She reached for the iron latch, cold and stiff under her fingers, and pulled. The attic stairs unfolded with a hollow groan. Dust cascaded like falling snow as the wooden ladder settled into place. Duke whined low in his throat, but didn't resist when she coaxed him forward. The attic above was dark save for a single, unnatural glow, a faint, golden shimmer that seemed to hover without a source. As Emily climbed, the air grew colder, heavy with the scent of burned wood. Her flashlight beam cut through swirling dust, illuminating piles of forgotten belongings, boxes of children's toys, a warped trunk, and a scorched rocking chair tilted awkwardly in a corner. She stepped onto the attic floorboards, which groaned under her weight. The shimmer pooled around an object near the center of the space, a cracked photo album, its cover half-burned, pages splayed open. She knelt and turned the first page. The photos were of the same family she'd seen downstairs, but these were different. In one, the family posed on the porch, but the father's face was blurred, as if smudged by unseen fingers. In another, the mother stared directly at the camera, but her eyes were hollow white ovals. The final photo was the most disturbing. Kara, alone, her hands pressed against the upstairs window, her mouth open in what looked like a scream. The golden glow pulsed once, twice, then spread outward, casting shifting shadows across the attic walls. The sobbing sound grew louder and closer, circling her, though no one was there. Duke barked furiously, spinning to face different corners of the attic, his hackles fully raised. Then the rocking chair creaked forward on its own, just a slight motion, but enough to make Emily's blood run cold. A gust of freezing wind swept through the attic, and the glow suddenly coalesced into the shape of a small girl. Kara's form flickered, her translucent face twisted with fear, and pleading Emily's breath caught as the apparition raised a trembling hand and pointed, not at her, but at the floorboards beneath the rocking chair. The glow began to fade, Kara's outline dissolving like mist. "Wait," Emily whispered, stepping forward, but the attic was silent again. Duke sniffed the floor where Kara had pointed, pawing at a section of wood that seemed loose. Emily crouched, her hands shaking as she pried at the plank's edge. The board lifted with a reluctant creak, revealing a small, rusted metal box hidden in the hollow beneath. Its lid bore deep scratches, as though someone had tried, and failed, to destroy it. Emily's hands trembled as she brushed decades of grime from the rusted metal box. The lid's deep scratches felt deliberate, like someone had tried to erase what lay inside, but couldn't finish the job. Duke whined softly, pacing in small circles, his claws clicking against the attic floorboards. The house seemed to lean in closer, listening. Emily wedged her fingers beneath the stubborn latch and forced it open. The hinges groaned, and a musty gust of air carried the faint scent of old paper, scorched wood, and something coppery, like dried blue inside. She found brittle documents and small personal items, a cracked locket, a key wrapped in yellowed cloth, and a folded letter written in elegant, slanted handwriting. She unfolded the letter carefully, the paper flaking at its edges. The message was brief but devastating. "We can't escape it. Kara says it follows her even in her dreams. If someone finds this, leave this place and never come back. Burn it if you can, but it won't let you." Beneath the signature, a single initial M was a dark fingerprint stain. Emily's chest tightened as she realized the families hadn't merely abandoned the house. They'd been hunted. Beneath the letter was a faded newspaper clipping glued to a fragment of cardboard. The headline read, "Brooksville Blaze claims entire Ashwood Lane block, but one house remains untouched." The article described a fire 30 years ago that destroyed several homes, except the Ashwood house, which stood completely unscathed at the center of the devastation. Locals had whispered that the house wouldn't burn, though firefighters swore they'd seen flames recoil from its walls. Emily glanced toward the scorched rocking chair, now eerily still, and understood. This place was more than haunted. It was protected by something dark. She reached for the small key, testing its jagged teeth with her thumb. Beneath the key lay a Polaroid photo, its colors faded but still discernible. A blurry image of the Ashwood house porch, and on the steps, barely visible, a distorted figure crouched low, its limbs bent at unnatural angles. The photo's bottom corner bore the word basement scrawled in rushed handwriting. Emily's stomach dropped. She realized the attic wasn't the final secret. The true heart of the house waited below ground. Duke growled, a low, warning sound. As though he understood, the golden glow Kara had left behind flickered briefly along the attic walls before fading completely, plunging the space into darkness. Emily clutched the key and the letter, her mind racing. If the basement held the truth, it might also hold whatever had claimed Kara's family. A distant bang echoed from somewhere below, with striking wood, purposeful and heavy. The temperature plummeted. Duke barked once, sharp and urgent. Emily steadied herself, whispering, "Okay, we end this." She began her descent, knowing that whatever waited beneath the Ashwood house was watching. Emily descended the basement stairs, the old wood groaning beneath her feet. Each step sank her deeper into darkness, the air turning damp and bitter with the scent of mold and ash. Duke patted ahead cautiously, ears pricked, his growl a low, steady warning. The flashlight beam wavered across stone walls slick with condensation. At the bottom, she found a heavy wooden door, its surface charred as if licked by fire yet miraculously unburned. The small key from the attic fit perfectly into the lock. As it clicked, a tremor of cold seemed to ripple through the air, and the entire house creaked as though shifting its weight. Part of the basement beyond was larger than expected, a cavernous chamber carved into the earth. Wooden support beams jutted upward like skeletal limbs, and the dirt floor was marked with strange, looping patterns, symbols etched long ago. At the center of the room sat a small child's chair, blackened by fire, surrounded by a ring of melted candles long since extinguished. As Emily stepped closer, her flashlight flickered and went out, plunging her into a darkness so complete it felt alive. The temperature plummeted, and Duke barked furiously, his sound swallowed almost instantly by the oppressive black. A whisper slithered through the darkness. Kara never left. Then came the unmistakable sound of small, bare feet padding across the dirt, circling her, too quick to follow. The air thickened with the faint smell of smoke and something older, fouler. A faint, golden shimmer flared at the edge of her vision, and for a heartbeat she saw Kara's ghostly form clutching the locket from the box, her wide eyes filled with fear. Kara pointed toward the basement wall, where the stone seemed to pulse faintly, as if something beyond it was trying to break through suddenly. The wall cracked with a deep groan, and an inky darkness began to seep through, writhing like smoke with claws. The symbols on the floor faintly glowed, resisting the encroaching shadow. Emily understood. The candles, the circle. Someone had tried to trap whatever this was. She reached for the melted stubs, frantically repositioning them, whispering the words from the letter. "Burn it if you can, but it won't let you. Duke lunged at the advancing darkness, his bark fierce and unyielding. Emily struck a match from a forgotten box near the wall and lit one candle, then another, until the circle began to glow faintly again. The shadows shrieked, an otherworldly wail that rattled the beams overhead, and recoiled, retreating into the cracked stone. The golden glow around Kara brightened once more. She looked at Emily with gratitude and sorrow before fading completely, her presence leaving a sudden, aching emptiness. The basement grew still. Emily collapsed to her knees, clutching Duke as the oppressive weight lifted. When she and Duke finally stepped out into the cold night air, the house loomed silently behind them, its windows dark and empty. Emily glanced back one last time, knowing the story would never leave her, but the house, at least for now, had given up its ghosts.